Hi friends, Sean Linda from Two Black Guys with Good Credit here. Whether you're running a nonprofit, a school, or a small business, Walmart Business is here to support your mission. They make it easy to order what you need, from tech and cleaning supplies to everyday essentials, all at low prices and with helpful tools like spend tracking and tax-exempt purchasing for eligible organizations. Because when your operations are smooth, your impact can be bigger. Visit business.walmart.com to get started.
Bringing your business dreams to life takes heart and about 1,000 decisions a day. That's why Atlantic Union Bank's knowledgeable bankers are here for you with the right guidance and customized solutions to help you reach your business goals. So whether you're planning your next move, upgrading your space, or scaling to meet demand, we make sure your business is ready for what's ahead because we're big enough to support you, yet small enough to know you. Atlantic Union Bank. Any way you bank.
Welcome to the Great Coaches Podcast.
To me, being perfect is not about that scoreboard out there.
This is a chance of a lifetime.
When you can understand the person, you can then work towards a common goal.
We are all on the same team.
Know your role and do it to the best of your ability.
Focus on the fundamentals. We've gone over time and time again.
Your defense has got to be better.
Leave no doubt tonight.
Great moments are born from great opportunity.
My name is Paul Barnett, and you are listening to the Great Coaches Podcast, where we explore leadership through the lens of high-performance sport by interviewing great coaches from around the world to try and find ideas to help all of us lead our teams better. Our great coach on this episode is Rodger Schmidt. Rodger is a former curling champion and now coach. He was the European men's curling champion in 1985 and two-time German men's curling champion in 1987 and 1992. In 1994, he founded the Rodger Schmidt Curling Academy, based in Switzerland, and from this base, he has coached at 5 Olympics and multiple World Championships, leading the national teams of 8 nations, including Austria, Italy, the Czech Republic, Russia, and the USA. He is also the author of the definitive book on curling coaching, The 5 Elements of Curling Technique, which was published in 2011. Rodger has coached all over the world and so has a broad perspective on the dynamics of teams and human behaviour. He believes that good habits make good teams and also help the individual build the self-belief needed to clear your mind and focus on the execution of the required skills. He sees the interconnectedness of our actions and how we transfer energy from one moment to the next through the way we choose to think and move. He is quiet, understated, and conscious of the need to keep a certain distance from his athletes so that they can work effectively together, but not so close that the athlete's efforts are misdirected into pleasing him. I found this interview to be just as graceful as the sport of curling, and some of the other parts of the interview that resonated with me were his desire for all athletes to actually have a big ego and to use it for the benefit of the team, and the slogan, "We Go," that he uses to illustrate this. His experience of failure at the Vancouver Olympics and how this shaped his philosophy of ensuring athletes can perform multiple roles within the team. And the importance of routines and mental keys to ensure that you don't overthink when you are under stress. This was an insightful conversation, and I hope you get as much out of it as we did. And just before we go to the interview, if you're a first-time listener, you can check out our library of interviews with other great coaches at our website, thegreatcoachespodcast.com. And while you're there, if you'd like to help our podcast, which is fully independent and free from ads, you can follow the link to our Patreon page where we offer exclusive content to our supporters. And now, please enjoy our interview with Rodger Schmidt.
You're listening to the Great Coaches Podcast.
Good afternoon, Mr. Rodger Schmidt, and welcome to the Great Coaches Podcast.
Thank you. I appreciate having the chance to chat with somebody about all this stuff from time to time.
Well, I, like a lot of people, love watching the sport of curling when it comes around every 4 years. It's such a graceful sport, very relaxing. So I'm really looking forward to hearing from you about all things curling, but maybe just a really simple question if I could begin with. Rodger, where are you in the world today and what have you been up to so far?
You want to know my day. I'm trying to work a lot less. I'm actually in my curling hall facility in Küsnacht am Rigi, Switzerland. We have 4 sheets right outside, and during the day there's not much going on. So I come in here and I kind of get my bearings and do my 2 or 3 hours of work a day and then move on. But today's a bit special because I'm actually playing a game tonight in Zurich. We play like 7 or 8 games a year. So after this, I have to get out there and practice a bit because at my age, I don't throw them very well anymore. And we play in the not very super league, sort of guys who used to play very well, but we don't practice and play well. So, but it still gets a little competitive. So I've got to get out and practice right after this interview.
Hopefully this conversation gets you into the mental space to dominate the game this evening.
Okay, well, we hope so.
Rodger, I'd like to start with a pretty broad question, actually, because you've been to the Olympics 5 times as a coach, as well as participating in numerous world championships. But you also have first-hand experience working with some really great coaches. I understand Phil Drobnik and Olga Adrianova from Russia are both very highly respected in the curling world, and you've worked with them. So I would like to ask, from this perspective, what is it you think that great coaches do differently?
I think the number one thing is to be a great coach, I think you need to be open to new ideas. And you also have to keep being prepared to rebuilding. I mean, the thing is, what you've done in the last 2 years, somebody else is going to be doing that. And you have to be creative, and you have to be always trying to look for ways to go forward in your programs, in your messaging, in your consistency, and kind of relate your programs and your training to moving forward and not keep doing the same things you always did. Because what worked last year might not work this year. So I think the openness that I've seen in coaches is what I would suggest that people do more of.
Curling's often been described as chess on ice. And every 4 years, the Olympics comes around and we all sit there transfixed. It's so graceful. It's a very peculiar sport. But it's something very egalitarian, or something like, I feel like when I watch it, anyone could do it, though I know that's not the case. But what's the role of a curling coach? Could you talk us through how you prepare the team?
I think the chess on ice analogy, which I actually have heard before, is pretty accurate, except people miss one thing. If you're going to make a move on the chessboard and move a rook to some position, there isn't going to be a guard in the way and that you smash into, or, you actually have to execute it. It's not just the thought process. I mean, making the right decision is only a part, but can you actually do it? So the combination between the mental things you need in chess and then having the skills to actually complete the move on the king or the queen or whatever. You can tell my chess is not as good as my curling. But I think it's a good analogy, because I think we'll maybe get to this kind of thing later, but it kind of fits now. I mean, there's the thinking aspect and the doing aspect, and you have to be able to combine both. And if you spend too much time thinking, you don't do very successful doing. In other words, you don't execute. And that's that balance. Like when your head gets full of things, like too much chess in there, you're not going to succeed.
You're the author of what I understand to be the most authoritative book on curling, and it's called The 5 Elements of Curling Technique. The 5th element is to do with the mental aspect of it, but I was wondering if you could just take us through what those 5 elements are and just describe that for our listeners.
That's kind of interesting. I mean, there have been a lot of books written in the sport of curling on technique, but I don't think one that maybe combined things together quite as much. But the idea of the 5 elements of technique was that we were going to do a series and have the 5 elements of mental, the 5 elements of strategy, and the 5 elements of physical. That was sort of the intention back when I was with the U.S. in, I think, 2008, 2010, something like that. But my approach to 5 elements is, and I come into coaching curling from really development point of view. Quite frankly, when I started coaching curling, there weren't very many coaches and there were hardly any good ones, because coaching in our sport, I'm talking 20, 25 years ago, it was somebody's father or somebody's uncle or some guy who just wanted to hang around and buy hamburgers for the team was designated as a coach. Fortunately, and I'm very grateful, now it's very professional, as you said, with Phil and Olga and people, the sport has developed. But I was at it a long time before that. When I was getting athletes, other people had worked with the athletes, but you don't want to have to redo everything when an athlete has, bad habits and just bad fundamentals. So the idea of 5 elements was, as a coach, I sat down and I said, what are the 5 things I would like to have in the technique of delivering a curling stone? That the other things I have to do then are just details. I don't have to rebuild everything, right? If these 5 things are in the technique, then that's a good start for an athlete. That's how the concept came about. There wasn't really good things that went in a program in a development way.
I would love to hear you talk through them. I was watching a video on YouTube where you were being interviewed and you were there with the US coach, the senior coach, and maybe one of the junior coaches. And it was a very simple explanation of the steps that you go through in technique. And I think the ability of any coach to break down a skill into the steps that need to be executed is a skill in itself. So I'd actually be very interested just to hear you run through the 5 as they're detailed in the book.
Okay. In element 1, I sort of look at it as what you do before you do anything. In other words, it's the setup. It's getting your body and stone in position. And it also means you have to find your center, because curling is, my whole teaching method is the center of body mass of the stone and of the body. So the element number 1 is just getting your lines lined up, knowing how you approach the target. Because if you're wrong there, nothing else goes forward in a good way. You're going to have conflicting energies. Number 2 is building the energy and transferring the energy. And there's energy transfer because the stone has no energy. The stone gets its energy from the body. So transferring the athlete, knowing how to transfer energy to the body, keeping it on the line, of course, and speed. There's also an inner body transfer in there, because in the action that we have, which is very specific, there's one foot in what we call the hack, which is your pivot point. And so one leg drives and the other leg has to take the balance. So you have an inner body transfer from the drive leg to the sliding foot, the sliding leg. So that's element 2. And again, the center of body mass has to be consistent in both those. Element 3 gets much simpler. It's the sliding phase, when that beautiful part you see that looks so elegant when you're watching it on TV. That is elegant with the top athletes, not so elegant for people who are still struggling to learn the skills, is the feel. You have to feel what transfer you've made to the stone, because now the stone has the energy. So element 3 is feel. Element 4 is finish, releasing the stone, putting it on target. There's a lot of little details in those last 2, but it's basically just feel and finish. And element 5 was designed because as the mental aspect of it, if you don't understand what you're doing, no matter how beautiful you do it, you're not going to have much success, because it's the knowledge. It's what I call the curling intellect. You have to have curling intellect, knowing the ice, knowing what will happen if I throw it this way, if I throw it that way. And this happens in all sports. And most good athletes do this fairly automatically because they've been trained, but not at the development level. So we brought it to a cadence. Element 5 really is curling intellect, like knowing the shot. If you don't know the shot, how are you going to succeed in the shot? You could make a pretty good argument that could be element 1 and the others could be pushed along to 2, 3, 4, 5. And I think it's a good argument and it's valid, but it also means it's like a shot routine. After you've finished the stone and your stone is gone and it's going to go hit another stone and roll perfectly to its target, you still aren't finished with the process, because what you learned on that shot may be very important to when you get into the hack to play the next shot, which will be the shot after the next team playing. So it's really a shot cycle. And that, I think, helps athletes then to understand the throwing of the stone and understand which element am I working in now. And it made us build, I think, very strong programs where the athlete could really know, okay, I'm working on the transfer. It isn't quite right. I need to set my foot position or angle my foot a little different. So then from that, you get into the details when you're working with the athletes. It's important for the learning process, because then the athlete knows specifically what he's working on at any given point in time, and he can see how it all fits and builds together.
Just looking at that last element, I mean, it's very much about the mind. And in fact, I found this quote from you where it says, the 5th element is the most important element. You can become as skilled as you want to be and have a beautiful technical delivery, but if the brain doesn't give you the message of what to do with the stone, it won't work. And so I wanted to ask, how would you go about coaching to improve, you called it intellect or decision-making or choices? How do you coach someone to improve in that area?
Well, you've really hit the point, because I think any skills to succeed become automatic. And you can train elements 1, 2, 3, 4 to become automatic. And they'll look good and the skill will be fine, but you may not have success because you threw a perfect stone, but you didn't realize that it wasn't going to curl that extra 3 inches at the end, just as one example. Or you threw a perfect stone, but you didn't realize that your sweepers who actually make that stone work for you had no chance to sweep it because it was beautiful, but it was too strong, or whatever the issue is. So the mental aspect becomes the most important. And I think all coaches you talk to, when they get down to the refining the skills, will be the same. And here's the example. There's actually an energy transfer in the mental aspect, because somewhere you have to transfer your thinking to feeling. And we developed in that 5 elements, we develop a sort of a cadences, and we would teach, say, know the shot, feel the shot, finish the shot. So it's a nice rhythm for athletes. Okay, did you know the shot? Yeah, I know the shot. Okay, then you got to feel the shot. You have to make that transition from knowing to feeling. That's training. That doesn't happen automatically for everyone. And not only that, let's throw a little world championship pressure into that right now. So making that transfer from knowing to feeling in practice is easy, or relatively easy. You don't have the stress and pressure. But now when your brain starts to kick off other things which become emotional, which come from fears, come from all kinds of things, come from the lights being bright and you're not used to it, whatever. It's hard to make that clean transfer from knowing to feeling. So, or even a great athlete's coming to the hack sometimes, and they're just not that 110% confident that it's going to go right because there's interference. And when your brain gets too involved, if you can't block the brain out, block the thinking part, transfer the feeling, that's when mistakes occur. So that's where the mental aspect comes in. So you've segued me right into why we felt we had to write another 5 elements of mental for curling.
Rodger, is there a moment that you can articulate or recall that is your greatest success with taking a team, implementing this technique, and then seeing their results? Is there one instance or a couple that you could just to share with us?
The thing is, it's a process. I mean, if I see people just performing better and performing consistently, that's really the reward. I mean, curling coaches don't get paid very much money at all. So you're not doing it for that. You're doing it because you have a love of the sport and because you're helping athletes to succeed. Last year with this junior team, and it wasn't sort of an official role, but because these young athletes asked me to help them because I had stopped with Russia the year before and wasn't going to do any more Olympics. I had sort of retired a year before the COVID already. Just seeing them go from having no chance to winning the Swiss championship was pretty rewarding because it was the mental. Their skills were okay, but they believed so much in themselves and they worked so hard at their mental side that it just, for at least that last 2 weekends of the championship, got easy and they succeeded. That was rewarding for me. The reason I took on the challenges in my facility here, one of the young guys trains here all the time, and they were kind of the 4 guys who they're in junior, their teams had all aged out and they were like leftovers. And so they're from other parts of Switzerland, but none of the 4 guys, none of them had a team. So they just kind of were the leftovers, and they're all in kind of their last year of junior. And they were playing like leftovers when we first got together. But then they really took on the challenge, and they really, were different dogs from different towns, but they pulled together in the right moments to succeed. And I think you want to make your athletes better, and it's really nice when they have the success, when they work hard and then they overachieve a little bit at the right time.
You've coached national teams from the Czech Republic, Italy, Austria, USA, and Russia. And so I'm really curious to know, what have you personally learned about adjusting your style of coaching to fit in with these different cultures?
Now, I haven't noticed the differences so much. There's little cultural differences that maybe I should be more aware of. But curling has its own culture. An athlete sort of gets into the groove of curling. It's quite a nice community in the international curling world. People have great respect for each other in the countries, and so that hasn't been a great difference. Yeah, I haven't seen that much difference. I mean, my Russian athletes are no different than my American athletes, and I know that politically, yes, I just did say that, because people at the fundamental level are great people at the fundamental level, and I've really found that in work with the athletes.
So when you move into these new teams, whether it's the leftovers in Switzerland or whether it's the Russian national team, what are the first things you do when you set that team up, when they come under your leadership?
I'll get to that question, but I must say that the leftovers from Switzerland are the current silver medalists in the world in World Junior. So the leftovers, I may have been a little harsh when I called them that.
When you first start with a new team, how do you set them up? What is it you do?
I try to get on ice and play with them, like get them playing. Just get on ice, because when people are when you step on the ice, you're in the curling sport. It doesn't matter where you're from and nationality. So you start to see how people react and move. I watch videos. If I'm working with a team at a higher level that have got videos, I watch videos because I really want to see what they do well before I go in there and mess everything up. I think you build teams on their strengths, and I don't mean just technical, because technical easy to adjust. more the mental side, how they carry themselves, their habits. Good habits create good teams. Even if you mask them for a while, the bad habits come out at the wrong times when the pressure comes on. So I really look at that first. I don't think I've treated any athletes differently in any nations I've worked with. I've treated them with respect and dignity and athletes and tried to work with them on the same level. I don't get too close to my athletes. I think it's a bonus when the athletes like me, but it's more importantly that we learn how to work together. And I don't want athletes liking me too much, because it can take away from their own aspect and their own. They shouldn't be playing for me. They should be playing for themselves and their team and their teammates. So keeping that sort of warmth. I don't mean I'm a pretty warm person. So from that perspective, I don't mean that I'm standing there with a whip or a hatchet. Just really building the right rapport with the athletes so that you can, when you have to trigger them, that you can trigger them.
Hi friends, Sean Linda from Two Black Guys with Good Credit here. Whether you're running a nonprofit, a school, or a small business, Walmart Business is here to support your mission. They make it easy to order what you need, from tech and cleaning supplies to everyday essentials, all at low prices and with helpful tools like spend tracking and tax-exempt purchasing for eligible organizations. Because when your operations are smooth, your impact can be bigger. Visit business.walmart.com to get started.
What does it mean to live a rich life? It means brave first leaps, tearful goodbyes, and everything in between. With over 100 years' experience navigating the ups and downs of the market and of life, your Edward Jones financial advisor will be there to help you move ahead with confidence. Because with all you've done to find your rich, we'll do all we can to help you keep enjoying it. Edward Jones, member SIPC.
When I listen to your interviews and I've read some of the articles you've written in the Curling News, that you actually use the word energy a lot. And it's an interesting word, and you used it before when you were describing the 5 techniques. It's an interesting word because there's something intangible about energy. It's not necessarily something you can see it, but you can't always necessarily feel it or define it. And what I wanted to do was just think about negative energy for a minute, because I'm sure when you're at these Olympics or World Championships, your teams could get very stressed. It's longish. It can take a while to play a game. There's a lot of tension. Right. You're sitting around, you're watching, you're getting stuck in your own head. And I'm wondering if there's any particular routines or ways that you've found to sort of keep the team calm, de-stress them, and sort of get their energy flowing in the right direction again.
Definitely. You said some wise things there. I mean, you have to be prepared technically, so which we talked about. So out of the technical aspect, I try to get the athletes to break it down so that they're in a game, they're not thinking about their technique. It has to be automatic, but you still have your keys. You have your 3 technical keys. I place my knee here, and then I'm good. I make the transfer. I feel the weight. Whatever, each athlete has their own 3 technical keys. And that keeps them grounded. It keeps them consistent. It's a place to go when they're under stress and pressure. Or if they just missed a shot, they just go back to your routine, go back to your ABCs, whatever. All coaches have different ways of describing it. I make sure that in our training that the athlete, he goes into that game prepared and he's got his keys. Same thing mentally. You need to have your mental keys. So before match, for example, each athlete, they do their routine. They go through, they get prepared for their technical keys and their mental keys, or whatever they are. I breathe, I do this is what I do, keeps me on the same level. So that you can keep all those wolves and demons backed off somewhere when the pressure starts and stay in your routine. And the good athletes do that very, very well. They don't let emotions rule them and overtake them at the wrong times. They can keep it clear and they can make that continual transfer between thinking and feeling, Because the thinking side of your brain, when under stress, thinks it can think itself out of anything, right? So it just keeps firing thoughts. Most of them ludicrous, type that the poor athlete who's out there just trying to draw the forefoot. I mean, come on, you've done this all the time in practice. But now you have to do it. You can't get that thinking guy, the monkey on your shoulder that keeps rapping in your ear there and saying other things that you don't need to know at this point in time. If that analogy works, I'm not sure.
Oh, it does, very much so.
So, I mean, the thing is, the preparation. I mean, preparation is really a long process. I mean, we spend a lot of time on ice before championships, almost to the point of where you feel like maybe it's too much, but you have to. So the routine is there.
Rodger, on a curling team, one of the players is the skip, and it's their job to determine strategy, because in a lot of tournaments, the coach isn't allowed to speak to the players. So what do you look for when you're choosing the skip?
Well, he has to the skip is the coach essentially on the ice as well, because we can't communicate. The rules are finally probably archaic rules in my mind, but they're probably going to start to change, and they're going to allow more interaction with coaching. And I hope that's good for the sport. There's traditionalists who don't think coach should have so much involvement or even be in the building if you go back far enough on tradition. But so, yeah, you have to have a coach who your connection to him because of the strategy aspect, and he has to be sort of the key strategist in the game, the strategic leader, I call him. And he gets help from his assistant strategic leader, but, somebody has to be, otherwise the game drags on too much. You can't have committee rules because you're on time as well. So somebody has to show the crisp leadership. And you need a skip who can make those decisions mostly correctly and fairly quickly and anticipate what's going to happen more on the strategy side. So you need someone who has that curling intellect you require for the game, number one. But he also has to be able to convince his team that he's always right. And nobody's always right. But you have to convince your team that this is the right thing to do, so you don't get into little skirmishes of what are we doing this for? Well, this is what we always do when things go wrong. And you don't get the muttering and the negativity, energy negative you had said before. So he has to be able to make the people around him better, which is the real key to leadership. And he has to make the people around him confident in him, and then they'll perform better. A lot of those things are things that a coach would normally do, right, if you analyze what I just said. So he has to have a lot of coaching aspect abilities on the leadership side, keeping the team going. And also interactions with the opponent, which is somewhat limited in curling, but not completely limited, because it's a competition. You're playing against 4 other players. It's not like ice hockey where you can take them to the corner, but there's a lot of things going on that the public doesn't see in the communications and in the way the body language is and the way you aspect and teams. And when you talked about energy before, I always think that on that sheet, it's a fight for energy. Like I want my teams to own that sheet. They let the other team play there because they have to have an opponent, but they own the sheet, and that's all part of energy. A lot of it is subliminal. Your skip has to be really aware of the dynamic that's happening on your team and the other team, and when to make this move, when to make that move. So, yeah, finding that guy isn't easy, and developing him usually takes some time. We were talking about the skip, yeah.
Rodger, I've heard you talk about your experience with the USA team at the Olympics in Vancouver, and you said the skip went cold and there was no backup plan. I'm really interested. Could you share this experience with us about what happened and how it changed your coaching philosophy as a result?
Oh, I sure could, yeah. And the skip on the men's team that we're talking about is now the reigning Olympic champion, which is fantastic. I love the guy. But in that Olympics, I mean, hey, we're all people, we're all athletes. John went cold in first 2 or 3 games, and he was younger then, but a wonderful talent and a guy with great leadership abilities too, and a real honest, great love for the game. I really always enjoyed working with him, and I think he with me. But so what if you miss last shots where you have to close out the game relatively, on a shot you make 95% of the time, and you do it more than once? Something's not quite firing right. The athlete is not in his groove. He's not in his place right then. So that was, my criticism of us, and I mean all of us. Phil Drobnik was working with us too. Then Phil was still developing as a coach, but I think it's just fantastic that they go back and that they won the last Olympics. So I must say that again.
Yeah.
But this just shows, and I think that your interview here, this shows the growing pains you have to go through to become a great athlete. You gain strength from bad experiences. But back to your question on the coaching aspect, I think the game needs to develop a little bit more because you need a backup plan, and we need to work more on the backup plans. I think as our sport develops, you can play lead on a team, the number 1 position, but you should also be able to play another position. If something changes, you should work harder and train harder. There's no reason that you can't do more than one task in our sport. You throw those 2 stones here, you throw them there. You just become that good. But you need to also then have the opportunity to do it more often. And I think that's where we break down. We don't juggle our teams up to play certain competitions and say, hey, why don't we play this competition and put this guy in goal? as other type of thing. We in the past haven't done that enough. And then consequently, there's been traditionalists in the game who say, well, you never change a team. So you play number 3 on the team and that's it. That's your life. I started out playing as the number 1 with the greatest team in Canada back then. I became a skip later and got to world championships and won Europeans doing that. If I'd have been sentenced to lead forever, I'd have won a lot of stuff, but it doesn't mean that you can't do more if you're an athlete. You look at the sport of baseball, when the pitcher starts throwing it over the plate and his breaking ball isn't breaking and the balls are flying over the fence behind him, they take him out. If the goalie in the hockey, the red light's blinking behind him, they take him out. They don't take him out to penalize them. They take them out to save them. They take them out because they don't want to, why ruin your confidence more? Take a break. You'll be back tomorrow. Regroup, have a chance to get yourself back together. We haven't done those things in curling very much because it's been, well, there hasn't been coaches and there's been traditional sport and there's always criticism. I vowed after that I would not have a team, that I couldn't have confidence that somebody else could step in and skip if we ran into a problem. I mean, what if COVID hits? What if you get sick? Then you're just all going to say, okay, well, we're done. We'll go out and play these games and we're just going to lose. Silly. Every team I've worked on after that, we prepare for it. We say, if this person can't play, here's how we line it up. And we'll practice that routine. If this person can't play, this is how we'll line it up. So you're prepared beforehand. And then the dynamic doesn't shift too much because you're prepared for it. So after that Olympics, yes, and with my teams, I made sure that we had as much as possible other alternatives should something go wrong, whatever the something is.
I'd like to build on this idea of changing the dynamic in the team a little bit, if I could, Rodger, because I've got another really good quote from you where you say we need to demand more of our athletes. A good player on the wing is going to give you the game that you need. You put him at centre, he's going to have to adapt to that position. I don't think it's wrong to ask this of our athletes. So it actually led me to think, are there any values or behaviours that you always expect people in your team to adopt?
Well, we always want to be a we and not a me. And I want my athletes, everyone out there, to have a big ego, but I want them to know how to use it for the benefit of the team and not just the benefit of them. I think we worked a lot on that in teams I've worked with. We even use the slogan, ego, you need ego, but you put the W in front of it. It's a we go. You change the ego to we go. Because if you have the right ego, then we go. We've built that into our slogans to say, and that's the kind of athletes I want. You're not playing for yourself, you're playing for a team. And I think very rarely has that broken down in teams I've played with. We may have not succeeded, but we always played with the right energy in that sense, if I use that word again. Yeah.
Rodger, what do you enjoy most about coaching?
That's a tough one now that I've sort of stopped. I don't get close to my athletes, but I really love my athletes. There's a professional distinction there. And succeeding when, overachieving, I love, because the feeling that the athletes get when you do that, you've done something special. I haven't had the luxury to coach teams that much that won all the time. I mean, we've had some good runs from time to time with Russian women, especially. We won a lot of medals. So that was rewarding. And I guess, kind of when you see people that get it, like if we talk about the mental side, I try to get when the athletes really start believing in what they should be believing in, because there's believing and there's thinking you're believing. How deep is your belief in yourself and your team? Because if you ask an athlete, are we going to win today? Oh, yes, coach, of course. But it's easy to say. But on the inside, you really believe. And I'll give you an example of that. We had, when I started coaching the Russian team, Sidorova, who had been successful already and a good team, and I've known them for a long time, played against them, and we traveled the same circles. I went through the statistics before I coached them, and I realized that when they got down 2 or 3 points with 3 or 4 ends left in the game, I couldn't find one competitive game where they came back and won. This is the first year, I guess, I was really sort of working with them seriously, because I had coached the Russian men before that, but not them, not the women. They argue with me, say, well, that's not, it can't be, I said, well, okay, we have a statistician here, Alexander. I said, Alexander, go to your computer and find a game, find me one. And he said, look, I don't have to go because there is none. They've never come back. So I challenged them and said, believe in yourselves. If you believed in yourselves, you would come back. And we had been talking about, they were a really good team, but we wanted to become a great team. This is before Trumpism destroyed the word great for all of us civilization forever. But we wanted to be, instead of just a good team, we were a really good team, we wanted to be a great team. I said, great teams have to win, a lot of times have to win games that they never should have won. When you're behind, you shouldn't win. The other team shouldn't let you back. But if you don't win games that you shouldn't have won, you will never be a great team. And so we had this discussion. I said, you just don't believe, because the first element of my 5 elements of mental, which we didn't put in a formal book, but I've used forever, the first element is believing. And we spent the whole first season just working on believing with a really good team. So there's an end to the story eventually. We're playing the Universiada. We played really well. We ended up in the gold medal game against Canada. And we were really playing strong. But that game, we just started awful. We were like 4 or 5 down. I don't know the exact detail here, but about 4 down, I think, on the break in 5th and 10 end game. So I came out and said, you have been telling me that you can come back in games and that you believe enough to come back. I said, this would be a good time for you to prove that. That's pretty much all we said. And of course, the story comes back. Yeah, they did. Came back and won an extra and actually just played like monsters. But the best part of the story, we have a traditional, we had been winning from time to time. So we have a traditional champagne in the room, in the hotel room. And as we cracked the champagne, they all stopped and they stared at me and they said, now, coach, we know what you mean about believing. And that would be a rewarding moment, because that's kind of, you see, well, you got it. But after that, we went on a roll. We started to win just a ton of things, like went on a real good roll. And it just was a change, because it changed the belief. Now you weren't afraid of getting behind anymore. You could play more offensive because you know you can come back. So you can take a few more chances. You can change your strategies. It just changes so many other dynamics or so many other things. And the power of your team changes, because something goes wrong, you don't panic. Oh, you're so much stronger. A whole different form of believing than when we just read it on paper.
Rodger, you've coached all over the world, some great men and women, adults, youths. What's the legacy you think you've left as a coach?
I choose to believe this. I suppose that the athletes that I've worked with can go back and say, hey, it was great working with Rodger. He did. I learned this from him. That was a good experience we had there. But not talking name and lights, talking that people in their hearts can say, hey, that was a great experience, kind of like what I channel now. I suppose some of those girls would say that was one of the best glasses of champagne we had there, and that's enough of a kind of a legacy. Seeing John Schuster win after all the time we spent together, I mean, right out beside me here is the ice where we did a lot of training, because they came over here to train. I've been lucky that people have come to train with me, even years, and so it's kind of nice. I remember working with John Schuster and trying to throw these big, hard clearing shots, working on just that end, that little finish on him. And I said, hey, John, you're using the little gun. You got to learn how to use the big gun. And then we just have fun with that. And I say, okay, now that was a big gun. And say, yeah, okay, nah, still a little gun. You know, just the finish and making it pop, getting the right handle. Some of those little moments, you know, where you're working on something and it's enjoyable. You're having fun, but you're really fixing a skill that you're going to use sometime, you know, later on. So little things like that. I'm good to go through all the pains we've gone through with the athletes, because, I mean, we've suffered some serious defeats. I mean, the Vancouver Olympics weren't a joyous occasion when things just don't work. But you have to be a grown-up. You have to be strong, and you have to be good enough to take the good with the bad. And so I don't just think about all the awards. I think about the whole thing as kind of the process that I've gone through. Yeah.
Rodger Schmidt, it's been wonderful chatting to you today and learning a little bit more about curling. I wish you all the best for your next foray into coaching, and also for the game that you've got this evening.
Okay, yeah, tonight, yeah. I'll be on my best. I got to go practice now.
Thanks, Rodger.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. It's Paul here, and you have been listening to our interview with the great coach, Rodger Schmidt. Some of the other key highlights for me were the importance of mental skills and the energy transfer that occurs when moving from thinking and feeling to doing. And it's this moment when most errors can occur, so you must practice this transition. That the great coaches are open to new ideas, they are creative and always looking for ways to go forward in their programs. And the importance of the team captain, known as the skip in curling, in making quick decisions based on their anticipation of what is about to happen, as well as dealing with the negative energy that can fester at the subliminal level within the team. I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. And just before we go, if you have any feedback, then please let us know. Just like One More Bad app from the United Kingdom, who said, inspiring and insightful, let the egos out of the door and taking care about people. Being able to say what's the legacy you are leaving, help people and teams about being resilient and writing down the challenges and what was needed to overcome them. Thanks for sharing. And Pia27 from Australia, who said, "Great podcast with thoughtful and genuine questions. Keep up the great work." The interaction with the people around the world who listen gives us great energy, and all the details on how you can connect with us are in the show notes and on our webpage, thegreatcoachespodcast.com. We look forward to hearing from you soon.